All right, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Ari Louis Show here on Israel Sports and News Radio. Thank you for joining us. We have a great show coming up. If you'd like to email us at any time, whether during the show or after the show, you could do so at arilouisshow@hotmail.com. And if you'd like to make a financial contribution, you could do so through PayPal at israelsportsradio.yahoo.com. A lot of stuff going on in the world of Israeli basketball. Playoffs are on the horizon. On the line right now to discuss all of that. It's the Sports Rabbi, Josh Halickman. Sports Rabbi, how you doing out there?
All right, what's going on, Ari?
Things are going great. It's great to have you on. And last night there was a big game in the Jerusalem Stadium near Malcha. Tell us what happened last night.
Of course, Hapoel Jerusalem played Maccabi Haifa in a big game, and unfortunately for those that like Maccabi Tel-Aviv, Hapoel Jerusalem defeated Maccabi Haifa 90-67. Lior Eliyahu had 18 points. They got good points out of Dante Smith with 15. Dion Thompson, who just came over from China about a month ago, he scored 13. Hapoel Jerusalem really manhandled Haifa, who had a decent year up to now, but hey, what could you do? Jerusalem's a tough team playing at home in their beautiful brand new arena, and off they go. Not very much competition. Jerusalem's looking like a very, very well-oiled machine, and I got to tell you, Ari, Maccabi Tel Aviv, they play Friday afternoon against Nahariya, and they've not been looking very good of recent.
Yes, and you were talking about Dante Smith. You think that at the end of the season he'll end up winning the MVP because he's had a pretty good season so far, correct?
He's had a good season. He's been inconsistent, though. I mean, there's been some games where he just doesn't show up. It depends how Dante feels. If Dante feels he wants to play, he plays. If Dante feels he doesn't want to play, he's just not going to play. And we've seen that a number of times, be it in the State Cup Championship back a couple of months ago where he just didn't show up against Maccabi Tel Aviv, and Hapoel Jerusalem got slammed in their own arena. But then if you go back to about November, and Maccabi Tel Aviv were in Hapoel Jerusalem's home when in the regular season, Maccabi Tel Aviv lost by 30 points, and Dante Smith himself almost scored 30 points. So it depends what Dante wants to do. You know, Dante, you got to look at it this way, Ari. Dante Smith really wanted to be in the NBA. He has the talent to be in the NBA. And that's a lot. That's the story with a lot of athletes. It's what they put in is what they get out. And sometimes just Dante just doesn't put it all in.
Do you think, therefore, he's kind of riding things out? A lot of times players have so much talent and they're more talented than their peers, that they simply don't work as hard because they can let their talent carry them most of the way.
I mean, that's definitely the case in certain leagues or certain teams. And I was speaking to an athlete earlier this week in a different sport, and I was saying, you have this guy XYZ on your team, and he's having a great year. He's scoring goals, and he's fabulous. And the guy goes to me, well, you know what? He's just not. He doesn't put in as much as other players put in, and if he put in more, he could get a hell of a lot more than what he's producing right now. And the question is, do those players end up going to the highest leagues in Europe or the better competitions? And that's why some players just like it in Israel or in other leagues around the world, and not the best leagues where they can make a decent salary, they could play, they could put in what they want to, and whatever they don't want to put in, they don't have to put in, and they're still head and shoulders above the rest.
Let's talk a bit about the standings. You know, Rishon LeZion is third and Cholon is fourth. Does that surprise you at all? I mean, they'll be the dark horse teams going into who wins the Israeli championship. So tell us a bit about Rishon and Cholon.
You know, Rishon LeZion has had a very good year this year. Record-wise, they're only 2 games over 500, but in this league, it's very hard, and there's a lot of parity. If you look at places 3 through 8, you're looking at 2-game swing between 17 and 15 and 15 and 17, which is quite unbelievable. You have a team like Rishon LeZion's had a solid year. Are they the greatest of teams out there? No, they're not the greatest of teams, but they play good team basketball, and that's the recipe to succeed in the Israeli league, is to play good team basketball. The same thing with Cholon. They play good team basketball. When you play good team basketball, you end up winning. Last night, for example, Cholon defeated Bnei Herzliya 78-75. And they had good team basketball. You had how many guys on the scoreboard? For Cholon, 9 guys. You know, Evans was 20, McGuire was 16, Roosevelt was 9, Harush 8, Sapir 8, Taylor 6, Guni Israeli, who had a great game last game, only had 5 points, Bowers 4, and Beit Yosef with 2 points. Bnei Herzliya, they're like a two-pony show. You have Wright and you have Yuval Naimi. Julian Wright's a great player. Again, a player that could have played in the NBA, but how much does he want to put in? He scored 22 points. Yuval Naimi with 21 points. Oz Blazer, an Israeli, who's an up-and-coming Israeli. Maccabi Tel Aviv actually have their eyes on him. He scored 10 points, but he's been extremely, extremely, extremely inconsistent all year. Some games will score 10. Some games will score 1 or 2 points, and they do not play great team basketball, and they only had 6 players on the board last night. And I think that's the recipe for success in the Israeli league. Excuse me. If you have good team basketball, you're going to succeed. And you can beat the better teams. You can beat Hapoel Jerusalem. You can beat Maccabi Tel Aviv with that. And some of these teams have succeeded this year, and they have succeeded in the past. Again, playing good team basketball. And that's the secret in the Israeli league, Ari.
And we were talking about Maccabi Haifa earlier. Maccabi Haifa this year, 500 record, 16-16 up to this point. Do you feel they're a disappointment this year?
16-16, 500 in the Israeli league's okay. It's not terrible. They have had some very good production from some of their foreign players. You've also seen guys like Shubarich, who's Israeli, actually having a great year this year. Excuse me. Dagan Uzure with 8 points last night. He's had a good year. He's probably been the best Israeli in the league on a consistent basis. But, they brought back Moran Rat around December time, and he hasn't done a great job for them. He's been a shell of the player he used to be. And that was part of the reason why they never got up to a great start this year. There was a contract dispute, and then Moran Rat ended up playing for another team for a month or so, and then he went back to Haifa. He'd been recuperating for an injury. All these things play a factor. And again, if the owners want to invest in the teams, and that's what you end up getting. The foreign players that you get is what you invest in the team. If you're going to invest $10, you're going to get $10 worth of players. If you're going to invest $20, you get $20 worth of players. That's what it's like in the basketball market. And we're going to see a ton of that going on, of course, in the NBA Summer League in July. All the Israeli teams will send representatives down there and find the players that aren't going to make it with an NBA club and then try to snap them up. But each of those players aren't playing in the NBA because they have a flaw in their game. And at the end of the day, that's what, it could be in Israel, they're going to end up being better players. But again, they still have flaws in their game, and that's why they're not making the NBA.
Again, this is the Ari Louis Show, and our guest is Sports Rabbi Josh Halickman. Sports Rabbi, 2 years ago, we saw Goblik jump into the NBA, and you were talking about players going to the Summer League. Do you see anyone actually making it to the association, or they're just, like as you said, they'll return to Israel, hopefully they'll have better skills and play better in the Israeli league?
I think most of them are going to just return. Whatever foreign players will go to the Summer League will be for working out, and that's great. There may be one guy here or there that's going to get picked up. I mean, Joe Ingles last year played for Maccabi Tel Aviv. He was not a mainstay player for Maccabi Tel Aviv. He was a lanky power forward, could shoot a good three, could drive, but he was extremely inconsistent, and as the season wore down, his numbers kept plummeting. But lo and behold, he ends up going to the Summer League. He's from Australia, and he grabs a rotation position for the Utah Jazz, where he played a minimum of 10, 15 minutes a night. And he gave what the Utah Jazz needed, which was, some filler minutes in that position. He was steady. Were there better players last year in the Israeli league? For sure. There were better Israeli players than Joe Ingles. But yet, lo and behold, who makes the NBA? It's Joe Ingles. So it all depends on, the type of player, the style of play. There's nobody I can think of right now that has any chance of going to the NBA. Maybe if Dante Smith really, really wanted to, and there again, that's a question. And he's sitting with a nice big contract here in Jerusalem. What does he have to go try to get into the NBA for? He has a good life here. I don't know exactly where he lives, but some of the players like living in Tel Aviv. They have the beach life. They have a good situation. They pay well. And I've heard I'll tell you this, Ari. Last week I was listening to a Canadian sports radio station, and they have on their basketball analyst. He's a Canadian, and his name escapes me right now. And he was talking about when he was a player, and he said the best place that he ever played was Israel because he knew that he was going to get a salary on time. He was going to get a salary on time. The weather was good. He lived by the beach. He liked the women. It was a good life. He said, some of these places, Russia is a different atmosphere. Sure, some of the teams are going to pay, and they're going to pay big bucks, but you're sitting in minus 30-degree weather for, a few months of the year. Greece, you don't know if you're going to get paid. Spain's a good league. Obviously, we know that. France is a decent league, but not great. And then you have the other leagues, either in Lithuania or the Balkan states that are, they're okay. But players like to come to Israel. It's a good place. You look at a player like Alex Tyus, right? Remember when he came to the league? He went to play for Ashdod. He came out of the University of Florida. He converted with his wife. And, granted, he came here. He has a nice salary. He's playing well. But the name of the game for Alex Tyus is he wants to make the most money. So he'll go next year. Living in Israel isn't that important to him, and making more money is, and he is going to look to get the best contract he can. Each individual player has a different take and a different style that they want to live by.
There's also the aspect that a lot of these players, let's say the borderline NBA players, but in Israel they could start, they could get more minutes, and then if they're in the NBA, they're on the bench. That's a factor as well, right?
Definitely a factor, but we've seen that blow up in people's faces also. If you remember, Jeremy Tyler came over here, right? And he was going to play big minutes, and then he was going to go back to the NBA. He never played good big minutes because he didn't have the maturity level. He ended up going to China, straightened himself out, and then he ended up landing up in the NBA. But, there's sometimes players come out here and they get disappointed that they come here and they're not part of the rotation. They may be NBA style and caliber players, but they're not team players. And, players have to buy into certain systems, and especially in the Israeli league or European basketball, team ball is going to be, is going to trump individual talents. I mean, right now, as we sit here, I'm watching a reel of highlights, NBA highlights, and I'm looking at individual talents from DeAndre Jordan to Blake Griffin. And do they play good basketball? The Clippers, sure, they play good basketball, but my goodness, I mean, some of those dunks highlight reel one after the next, Ari. And you're not going to see that much in the Israeli league. And if a player does come here to try to do that, the guy's going to find himself on the bottom end of the bench. So he has to, on one hand, sure, they can come here and play ball and try to get minutes and work their way up to coming back to the NBA. But on the other hand, the managers and the coaches in this league, they have a job to win, and they have to keep their jobs as well. So to bring in a guy that's going to be a hotshot player may not work for the coach who is fighting for his own job to make his team succeed.
Again, we're speaking with the Sports Rabbi Josh Halickman here on the Ari Louis Show. Now, the last year, around Lag BaOmer, a lot of Israel was celebrating Maccabi Tel Aviv winning in the EuroLeague. They didn't make the Final Four, obviously, this type of round. Do you think last year was a bit of a fluke, or what? Did they get lucky? I mean, a lot of Israeli fans were telling me they thought they were going to go back there. I said, no, that's not going to happen. Last year was kind of a once-in-a-while type of thing. I know they have had success in the past, but it's just not going to be every year for Maccabi Tel Aviv. So talk about how Maccabi Tel Aviv did in the EuroLeague, if you were disappointed or thought they achieved what they could based on their talent level.
I think that you nailed it right there with your last statement. They achieved what they could with their talent level. Their talent was not as good as it was last year. The raw talent was never able to adjust to a true team play. The players weren't on the same levels, and we can start, looking through. Tyrese Rice last year had a miserable first quarter of the season. He was brutal. He was a ball hog. He wanted to show off his individual talent. He was put on the end of the bench. Alex Tyus, again, also was a disaster the first quarter of the year. Then all of a sudden, they started buying into David Blatt, who, of course, is the coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers today, started buying into his team basketball philosophy, and he was able to start using those two guys to play to their maximum. And what happened was that Tyrese Rice and Alex Tyus ended up hooking up on alley-oops, and they knew exactly where they were going to be. They each made each other better. Tyrese Rice, who enjoyed his time in Israel, but the most important thing for him was to make more money, and he left and he went to go make more money in Russia. And his team, he became the MVP of the Euro Cup, which is the second-tier European competition. He took his team to the championship and won, and he was the reason why. He not only was a great individual player, but he also knew how to make the players around him better. This year they brought Jeremy Pargo back, Maccabi Tel Aviv. And Jeremy Pargo also had all kinds of problems the first quarter of the season and didn't buy in. He's a great individual talent. He finally did buy in, but for some reason the connection between him and Tyus and him and the rest of the team just wasn't as good as it was with Tyrese Rice last year. Devin Smith had been playing injured part of the year as well, so that also was a big problem. Sofo came to camp, as we've talked about this so many times. He came to camp about 50 pounds overweight. Then until he lost his weight, until he got fit, and then he was hurt, and he's moaning and groaning, and, he was an unhappy camper. Alex Tyus is in the last year of a contract. They wouldn't extend him, and they wouldn't let him go out, so he's been an unhappy camper. Devin Smith was just given a 3-year deal. Yogav Ohayon, he had an okay year. He has not been as good as he has been in past years. Even last year he wasn't great, but he just hasn't been as good. The supporting characters coming off the bench, granted we talked about Joe Ingles last year, he still was a good player to come off the bench, and he was a good character guy. Good. As much as he didn't play near the end of the year, he was just the type of guy you want to have in your locker room. He's just the type of guy that put smiles on the guys' faces, loosened up the atmosphere, and was just a good guy, good person. And Maccabi tried to bring in Joe Alexander, and he's looked good at times, but I don't know if he's going to end up staying here. And he's more of a player that's fit to be in the NBA, and he hasn't played that many minutes. He's played, but he hasn't played that many minutes. And we're going to have to see how these players end up going towards the end of the season now. They're going to enter the playoffs, and Maccabi Tel Aviv is coming in horrible shape after getting knocked out by Fenerbahce Ulker in the EuroLeague, and they got swept 3 straight. And it was clear watching those games that Maccabi Tel Aviv did not have the talent. And why? They got lucky last year. They were able to get some bargains and some players that played well. This year, they ended up not getting the same type of players for the same type of money. And Fenerbahce was a much bigger budget, was able to do so.
Now, it was kind of brought up earlier in the season when you were on the show that Guy Goodis could be in trouble with his job. I mean, people are expecting to be David Blatt. I think that's too much, but he'll be fine with his job, I imagine, right?
I think that he'll be okay. I don't think he's going to get let go. He has another year on his contract. There's definitely been some situations over the last month and a half where he and Pini Gershon, the illustrious Israeli coach who came in as his assistant, have had differing of odds in style and play. Goodis following the Blatt playbook to a T, whereas Pini has a lot more rah-rah in him trying to get people psyched up, and there's been definitely a differing of opinions. Pini, from what all accounts are saying, will not be back next year. Is that going to be a good thing, bad thing? I don't know. But I think Goodis has done a decent job this year, and I think that the reason the team's been having a rough time is that the conflict between the two has been so severe over the last month. And then they started dropping a bunch of league games. They play a game against Nahariya, which should be a win at home. Probably will be a win at home. But again, Guy Goodis has got to get this team straightened up over the next little bit, or else it's going to be very big disappointment going into the playoffs. And if they end up playing Jerusalem in the finals, I would be very concerned right now. Jerusalem's playing great basketball. And not only do they have the individual talents that we talked about, they're playing good team ball. And they're ripe to win a league. They've never won the league before. And I got to tell you, I've spoken to Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, petrified. Absolutely petrified that they're going to lose to Hapoel Jerusalem. Not only that, I spoke to somebody yesterday, said, better it be that we get knocked out by a team like Haifa, that Haifa gives Jerusalem a better chance. So even if Jerusalem wins the championship, at least it's not against Maccabi Tel Aviv.
Wow, that's some severe hatred.
Oh, yes. That was from somebody yesterday. We were even talking about it. There's some severe hatred and severe concern in the Maccabi Tel Aviv camp right now.
All right, and before we get your prediction of what's going to happen in the Israeli League, I just wanted you to touch a bit about David Blatt in Cleveland, because there was some talk that him and LeBron James were fighting. LeBron was really the coach. So just give us your assessment, your thoughts of what David Blatt, how he's been doing in Cleveland, coaching the Cavs.
I think he's done a very good job this year. It's not easy to go into a totally brand new situation, new league. He's got to learn a whole new level of basketball. And not only that, he has to sit there with arguably the great player of our time right now in LeBron James, which is not going to add any ease to his job. because the expectations are much higher. LeBron James has more NBA experience. There's no question. LeBron James coming back to Cleveland is a big deal. Obviously, David Blatt knows that. He knows how to deal with egos. I think he's done a very good job. I don't think right now, I don't think there's any conflict between the two. I think they're totally on the same page. Were there times this year where they weren't 100%? There were definitely times where they were not on the same page and they were struggling, the team, and Blatt just wasn't getting through the players. LeBron James has been doing a great job. I think the loss of Kevin Love is going to be a huge problem for the Cavs facing the Bulls. And who's the better team? I think the Cavaliers are still a better team than the Bulls, but the Bulls have a lot of players, and they have a lot of solid NBA players, and they have a lot of experience. Yeah, and they have a lot of up-and-coming guys, from Jimmy Butler, and then getting Derrick Rose back, to Pau Gasol, to Joakim Noah. This is a good team. It's a good team. And the Cavaliers, without Kevin Love, and now the word is that Iman Shumpert, again, a rotation player, is going to be out. That's yet another player that's not going to play. Tristan Thompson's going to have to step up for them with Kevin Love out. And LeBron James is going to have to step up. There's no question. But can they lose? They definitely can lose. We saw the Heat lose twice in the NBA Finals with LeBron James.
Yeah, and if you're a Cavs fan, I think the feeling is if somehow they can get by the Bulls, they can hold on, get Kevin Love back for the Eastern Conference Finals, that could propel them into the NBA Finals. So, Sports Rabbi, months ago, you liked Hapoel Jerusalem from the beginning, and you thought that they could pull it off. Are they your favorite at this point to win the Israeli championship?
They are my favorite still. They are my favorite to win. I think Hapoel Jerusalem is a complete team. They'd have to have a mega, massive meltdown not to win the championship, no matter who they face. And I think the key was getting Deion Thompson from China after the league ended about a month and a half ago. They picked this guy up for the rest of the year. He provides good outside shooting, inside scoring, good defense, professionalism. He knows how to play, and he's the type of player that makes the people around him better. Since Deion Thompson's been on board, Tony Gaffney, who's had a miserable year, has been a much better player. Even last night, 9 points. Bar Timur, an Israeli who had been playing in Europe for last season, came back, was having a miserable year. He has become a much better player. Adam Ariel, a rotation player, has been playing well. Derwin Kitchen has just come back, trying to get into things still. But they're just right now they're a much better team. And Yotam Halpern, who's been hurt, didn't really play much last night. He'll be back for the playoffs, and I just don't see who's going to beat them right now. I have real doubts. But then again, as they always say, you can't count the champion out. The heart of a champion is still strong. Unfortunately for the Spurs, we heard that, and they didn't make it past Game 7, which was arguably one of the greatest Game 7s ever played in NBA history. And you're going to get that sometimes, but I think I still go with unless there's some kind of colossal meltdown by Jerusalem. I think Jerusalem's going to win, and I don't know what else to say.
Well, another saying is they also don't play the games on paper and all that kind of stuff, but I know what you mean. Yeah, they're certainly the favorites at this point, and Maccabi Tel Aviv fans are very nervous. Sports Rabbi, before we let you go, everyone out there listening, if they want to find out more about what you do, listen to your programming, where should they go?
SportsRabbi.com. You can check everything out over there. We do a weekly basketball, Israel Hoops NBA podcast. We also do an Israeli soccer podcast each and every week, so you can check that out. And, of course, we cover soccer, basketball, anything Israeli, sportsrabbi.com, and check me out on Twitter @thesportsrabbi.
Okay, great stuff. My guest has been the Sports Rabbi Josh Halickman here on the Ari Louis Show. Thanks, Sports Rabbi. We appreciate it. Great job, and enjoy the Israeli basketball.
I will, Ari, and of course, everyone keep a listen to Ari Louis. He brings you the best Israeli sports in the land.
Thank you so much. Be well, and Shabbat Shalom.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.